Welcome to a brand new episode of the Tomb Raider Lara Croft podcast, Raidercast. Today we are joined by a fan legend in his own right at the very heart of the Tomb Raider community. I would like to issue a big welcome to Hedy, who runs the official Tomb Raider Discord channel. Welcome to Raidercast, Hedy.
Hello, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
This has been such a long time coming.
I know it has, and I'm very, very excited to be here and to be featured on Raidercast, finally. So, I first was introduced to Tomb Raider when I was quite little, actually. The very first memory I have of Tomb Raider, I was basically like 2 or 3 years old, and I was watching my dad playing a train in the desert, actually, in Tomb Raider 4. So that was my very first memory. And then a few years later, when we got a PlayStation, me and my brother, we obviously had a few games to go with it. And Tomb Raider was some of those games. I had Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 4, if I remember correctly. At first, I didn't think much of them. And then one day I tried it because, you're a kid and you try stuff. And when I played it, it all just came back as if it was an old memory from the ancient life, just like, oh my gosh, I know this. I've seen this when I was a kid. And I just started playing them myself because I really, really liked the platforming and the and just having this really cool character running around in these ancient ruins and the Great Wall of China, and then one day she's in Angkor in Cambodia, and then she is in the Lost Valley in Peru, and this is how basically the cookie crumbled, and I became a huge fan. And never stopped talking about it, never shut up about it. And when I was in recess, even as a child, and then, just became an adult and started being a bit more involved in the Tomb Raider community when I became more fluent in English, obviously, because obviously I'm French. So when I started to be very comfortable with it, I started, getting myself more out there and, talk to people and make new friends.
That is wonderful. That's extremely relatable. That's so cool. Oh, thanks for sharing that. That's great. So today we are going to be talking about a controversial subject. It's a talking point that has flooded the fan base this year, and after currently unsubstantiated rumours have made some headlines. The topic is Tomb Raiders, plural. Not just one, multiple Tomb Raiders. So this, I think, has stemmed from the recent tabletop RPG, which I believe is called Mark of the Phoenix.
Yes, it is.
And so that was released as a multiplayer tabletop game. And I think the way that they've allowed this to be multiplayer is by having Lara have a team of raiders who work for her. And so whispers online have made out that this could also be the premise of the next main game, because also a similar theme has popped up in the Tomb Raider Live experience here in London as well. So for this episode, as a thought experiment, Lara, historically mostly a lone wolf, suddenly leading a team of raiders. So let's talk a little bit about this. How would it work? How could it work? And where do you stand on this matter?
Okay, so I start with something that I'm using facts right here, right? It's just a straight up facts that I've seen. When the tabletop RPG game was released, as Mark of the Phoenix was released, Crystal Dynamics' website does mention that this is a non-canon it was made by someone working at Crystal Dynamics as a passion project, if I could remember correctly.
I think you're right.
So I know that a long time ago, when we were announced with the unification happening, that every new appearance of Lara in guest games as cameos and stuff would be kind of used to what the direction would be for the unification. I think the fact that they specified non-canon in the Crystal Dynamics post has some importance, because this is one of the very first times they actually say, hey, this is non-canon. So this has something important to say about this. Um, about group of raiders that Lara leads. Obviously, I love every version of Lara personally. I think that all of her versions have their own charm to it.
Mhm.
But I do have a big preference for classic Lara. My favorite Tomb Raider game is The Lost Revelation. I love these games with my whole heart. This is how I got introduced to the franchise. And I do prefer Lara as a lone wolf. So it is true that I would rather prefer her to be more alone, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
There
absolutely.
is one thing though that I do not fully dislike is Lara having, perhaps her own new Zip maybe or Alistair, because even when you think about it, even in the classic, she had her own Zip during VCI. So
Yes,
she
yeah.
did have like a sidekick. He was there as obviously as a comic relief a little bit and as a brand new character, but it would not be the first time Lara would have, you know, allies on
Yeah.
her side. So we had like obviously Zip, we had Curtis, we did have Zip and Alistair as arguably if they brought something to the table or not. I know these were not the most liked characters sometimes. But even just Winston, to be fair, or even Father Dunstan and ah gosh, help me out here.
Charles
I'm
Kane?
Charles Keynes, thank you. Yeah. Lara has mostly been alone in her adventures. I fully agree with this, and this is what fits the best in my opinion. Um, but having maybe a few allies here and there, I'm not completely against
Okay.
this. But when it comes to multiple characters, like, did you mean by playable characters?
So this is the thing. And so I've devised a few different scenarios that we can talk about and see if we think that they might work, or if we like the idea, or if we are completely against the idea, and what effect each one could have on Tomb Raider in terms of its concept, and is it a step too far from the original concept, or does it still work? So we are going to dive into the first one. Let's see how we'd feel about these different ideas of teams based on this kind of scenario from other games. First of all, the Angel of Darkness approach. So this would be Lara is the main character, yet at some point during the game, you are required to play as a side character or characters all in one campaign.
So about the AOD approach, as you called it, I wouldn't fully hate it, but done very right. And I will explain why. Because Curtis in Terminator Angel of Darkness at first, he doesn't bring anything too new to the equation, but that's because of obviously the whole development about Angel of Darkness that couldn't go as is intended. But he was supposed to bring something very big to the equation, something that Lara could physically not be able to do.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. And the other thing about it, and is why I wasn't against Curtis even more, much later in time, is because I think, as we all kind of know now, there was supposed to be a sort of Curtis' own franchise. He was supposed to have his own franchise and be his own protagonist and be the demon hunter. And
Yes.
really, him being here would have made sense because he was supposed to have his own game. That would have been a really good way to, introduce him to, first of all, the Terminator community, obviously, but even to the rest of the world, because he is his own different character and his own different story. But when it comes to somebody else, I think that it would be very, very, very difficult to justify. And I do have one more reason why, is because it's been now 2 years that we know about the unification thing. I would be very surprised that after so many times saying Lara will become unified with all the timelines, that they give us obviously unify Lara, but also a brand new character without us being able to enjoy and discover who the new Lara is. In my opinion, that doesn't make much sense.
That is a wonderful point. And that is not something that I'd considered before. That is spot on.
I mean, it's just my opinion, obviously,
Mm.
and I think it would be very, very counterintuitive of Crystal Dynamics and Bristol Group or whatever to have new Lara, the new Lara Croft that has classic elements, LAU elements, and reboot elements, all of that to be have her spotlight stolen by a new character. That would be very, very well. The only term I would think is very dumb. Really, it would be. So that's why I think that having another playable character would need to be done extremely well for it to work. But that's the thing. I don't know if that's even possible to begin with, considering that it wouldn't make sense to begin with to have somebody new when we are discovering a new character herself. Well, new character that we are familiar with from all three of her era, but having her with all three of those in one character is something brand new that we've never seen before. So really, I don't see it being done.
You know what? Before answering, I was going to say I wouldn't be totally adverse to it, but I think you've literally just completely swung my mind on this. Like, you are completely right. This is going to be a new era for Tomb Raider because, yes, it's going to have all of the elements of the past, but this is going to be a Lara that we have not met before. Like, we have experienced parts of her past across different eras. If this is how the unification is going to work, we will have experienced some things from her past. So we will have an idea of her, but the stage where she's at now in her life is going to be so different, I'd imagine, that it would be a shame not to have an entire game to focus on her. I think if this was the sort of route that was to happen, I think I would prefer it if this wasn't the route for this next game. Give us at least one game to experience her and see where she is up to now in her life and to appreciate her new incarnation.
Absolutely.
And then perhaps in a sequel, then introduce someone else. But give us that time and the opportunity to re-fall in love with this new Lara.
Exactly. That would make sense because, as you said, right now, when we will meet the new Lara Croft, it would be just as if we experienced part of her identity, just part of her classic side, part of her LAU side, and part of her reboot side. But at the end of the day, having all three of them at the same time is something we never ever experienced. So fundamentally, it's a new character, a familiar face as a new character. So yeah, make us discover a new character first, like the one we're familiar with. Maybe start to introduce a few side characters here and there if we really want to go with Lara has allies, and maybe one of them can perhaps step out a little bit more on the next game if there's going to be a next game after that. Heaven forbids there's no game because I would be very sad. But it would make sense, and I really don't think that we are going to be having Lara's spotlight be stolen by someone just now. It feels too early. It feels way too early.
I completely agree. I also agree with what you said earlier as well, that I think that if there were to be another character, then their abilities and what they bring to the gameplay would have to be substantially different from Lara's own ability. Otherwise, there's not really much point. But then it comes to thinking, well, if they are totally different from Lara, and if they do have completely different abilities and the gameplay is totally different, is it still going to feel like Tomb Raider?
That's the thing. It depends.
Fine line to tread, isn't it?
It depends because really, to me personally, I know maybe some people will have a different opinion about this, but to me, obviously, Tomb Raider and Lara Croft are just deeply intertwined. Like, to me, there's no Tomb Raider without Lara Croft. Like, just regarding whatever behavior she has, if she's like this badass, confident, very lone wolf woman like in classic, or maybe slightly less sure of herself and more human reboot Lara. No matter if I have a preference or not, I do have a preference, but no matter if I have one or not, there is no Tomb Raider without Lara Croft in it for me personally. I don't know if some people share something, the different opinion, and it's perfectly fine. But I don't think that coming back to Tomb Raider, like Tomb Raider 12, like, new game after 5 years under Unreal Engine 5, this thing is going to be absolutely massive. There's no doubt about it. I don't see it become a boom without Lara Croft. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think most people will completely agree with that. I would say 90% of me agrees with that. Mm-hmm. Yet that I do have this little flicker of personally, I don't consider that Lara could be the only Tomb Raider. But this harked back to, like, right at the very start of the series when there was rumours that right at the beginning it was considered that she was going to be a male playable character, and then they changed it to be a female playable character. And I'm sure somewhere I've read that there was even going to be an idea that you could select which character you wanted to play as. Mm-hmm. And it got me thinking, Tomb Raider 1, if you were playing as a different character, but it was that same environment, that same story, you still had the same moves. It was just you were playing as a different model on screen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would feel any differently towards it than I do now. I think I would still love it, because it wasn't just Lara that I fell in love with. It was the game, the moves, the environments, the music, everything. So right. I don't know if just switching one of those elements out would wreck it for me. And I've said a few times over the years, if it was like modern Assassin's Creed and you did now get to sort of choose if you wanted to play as one person or another, oh, that'd be really cool, that'd be amazing, because it'd expand the story and all that. But I am under no illusion that it is way, way too far into the series to introduce something that game-changing at this point. It's just no. So one thing that did this right from the beginning is Resident Evil. So right back from the very first Resident Evil, you could play as Chris or Jill. And then in the second one, you had Leon and Claire. So the Resident Evil approach, where right on the main menu, you choose a player and you play through their campaign. So in this hypothetical, you could choose Lara, or you could choose one of 3 or 4 other playable characters. And each one would have a different story, a different path through this game. Yet at certain points of this story, they would maybe meet up and then go off in different directions. So you could see this one story from 4 different perspectives, but it's not necessary. You could just play as Lara from start to finish. Yet you might get more out of the whole experience if you do play as the other characters. What about that kind of scenario as like campaigns?
Well, it's very obviously it's a really good idea kind of thing to think about it. I mean, I'm not sure I would like it though, because obviously, as I said, to me, obviously Lara means Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider means Lara. The one cannot go without the other. Lara would still be in it, so that would be a first element that I would be okay with, obviously. What I would be slightly against about it is for several reasons. The first one is I would be scared that because there is several campaigns, they kind of, would reduce the quality of Lara's campaign, because to me, what needs to be obviously spot on, taking in mind everything I said just earlier about being a new game and, being this new Lara Croft character that we never really know right now, is we need this to be absolutely spot on. And having several characters and several campaigns, unless you spend literal months and months into each campaigns for each characters, it will reduce in quality for sure. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it would be a good idea. And also, the reason why I'm slightly against the idea is because we're, as you said just now, we're so deep into the franchise history. We're going through right now, the franchise turned 25 years very, very recently. We will be going to 30 in literally 3 years, and I'm not even 30. So, and really, it's just too far in the franchise to introduce a bunch of new characters. Whereas in Resident Evil, when we obviously had new characters very, very soon, and it's really the identity of Resident Evil to have several characters and several meet points. For example, I remember Resident Evil 6 when you had. Sometimes you would be able to play the game at 2 people all the time, and sometimes you would be able to have 4 people, because there would be like another duo that would meet you in a certain point in the story, and that would be fine if it was something that worked for Tomb Raider to begin with. So really, the Resident Evil approach for TL12, I would say a very big no. However, there was one thing I would be open to if if this formula was added into a Lara Croft spin-off game. In that case, where it was already the case, where it was supposed to be a multiplayer game, we started with Lara and Totek, and then we had Lara, Carter, Isis, and Horus. In that case, I would not be against it because that's the main idea of the Lara Croft spin-off game, and to have other characters to discover. I really like some of the new characters that the Lara Croft spin-off games added, and they make sense. So really, having this kind of thing of having several different campaigns, with one Lara has her own campaign with her own set of abilities, and maybe she has, I don't know, another Egyptian god that knows how to use mechanics from ancient Egypt, have his own story, and then they meet Lara at some point. Really, that would make sense for a Lara Croft game, that spin-off game, but not for a main entry Tomb Raider game, I don't think. That's my personal opinion on the matter.
Wow. Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. I think it's an interesting idea, but my worry would also be that it would water down the main campaign. And if it didn't water down the main campaign, and if every single one was sort of fully fleshed out, then that ties back to what we were discussing in the first point, that it could detract too much from Lara and Lara's experience within the Tomb Raider game. My final scenario was going to be something that's very, very similar to what you were just talking about, and I'm calling it the Final Fantasy approach. Not an RPG, but I think maybe the Lara Croft and spin-off series scenario is probably a more accurate name for this, because Lara is out in these levels and her team, these other raiders, are also with her. So you're going through this game and you have these other characters with her at the same time, and either you as the main player can choose to switch between the characters to use their different abilities and then immediately switch back to playing as Lara. So Lara and Totek, you need to go over to the other side of the room to do a switch, but she needs to be over here doing another piece of the puzzle at the same time, and you can switch between characters to do these things. That's one. Or it's just Lara out there in these levels with a group of other characters, but they are NPCs and they are doing their own thing, and you can't necessarily control them. Would that in itself, as a main Tomb Raider game, do you think that would be a step too far away from Tomb Raider's identity?
Honestly, yes. I think so. Because to me, Tomb Raider obviously is an adventure, puzzle-solving action game, obviously.
Yep.
So I'm not saying it would be impossible, but having different people to switch, as you said, that would not necessarily mean it's an RPG, but it would feel RPG-esque. It really would feel that when you can switch, I know what you're thinking, really. Like you're controlling Lara, and maybe you press a certain key on your mouse and keyboard, or maybe on your controller, and it switches to character, and then you can do whatever you want with them, and you switch back to Lara or another character. I don't know, it kind of breaks this feeling of Tomb Raider, of, having this character that you control, for example, in a temple, a forest, or an underground tunnel or something. And then to have it like, oh yeah, I can't do it. It would feel very weird for a Tomb Raider game. Like, the first thing that comes to mind is an old PS2 game that I used to play as a kid. I can't for the life of me remember the name of it. But there was a mechanic where you were able to do certain things with character, but not with another, so you had to switch. And it worked because it was the formula at the time, and it was how it worked to begin with. But to go through something so different in Tomb Raider 12, that would still feel weird, as you said, for a mainstream game. For a spin-off game, honestly, I'm open to any sort of ideas for a spin-off game, because that's the point of spin-offs. I am in love with Lara Croft Go. I even played it just recently again. And it's a great game. It doesn't have anything to do with the actual formula, as in, you have those acrobatics and stuff. It's a very, you move one direction or another to solve puzzles, because it still has some of identity with the puzzle solving, but it's a fundamentally completely different type of game, and it worked perfectly well. So why not, as I said, as a spin-off game, but as a full game, not really. And Lara with a group of people all running around together, but being NPC, unfortunately, that would feel like Lara is having a field trip with the class, with the main.
As I was saying it, I was like, this sounds like a field trip.
Yeah, it does. Like, it would come back to the whole idea of Tomb Raiders, like Laura having people under her wing. And, that idea itself, sure, why not? Like, Laura's a legend. She took us under her wing when we needed her most, when we were, teenagers and childs and stuff. So, really, I wouldn't fully hate it, but really, I want her to be mostly solo and not having, like, a bunch of random people. Like, I'm just imagining Laura just, like examining some sort of hieroglyphs or something like from Egypt, and she would be like very focused. And then you hear one of her NPCs like stepping on a trap and just be like starting chaos, and Lara just looking at him like, really, bro? And it just, I don't know, it would break the immersion too much, like because having different NPCs would obviously mean they all have their personality. Maybe you're gonna have someone that's clumsy, maybe you're gonna have something that's very, too curious and ask Lara all these questions 24/7 all the time. But I just think it wouldn't work. In a main hub, having Lara have NPCs in a main hub like we had obviously in not
Like
saying we
in
should bring it back, by the way, but in Paititi, not saying we should bring it back again. Sure, why not? She can interact with people, learn new information, and maybe learn, that would be interesting to have like some NPCs that be like, oh, maybe this place you've explored like a few hours ago. We came back to it and we thought we noticed something interesting, and maybe that would unlock something to come back to and backtrack to you to find maybe a secret or a new temple or something, and maybe new hints. And then in that case I would be fine with it, to bring back this kind of quest mission. I'm not against it fully, but again, it needs to be the right balance. I don't want too many interactions, but at the same time I am not against Lara sometimes interacting with people, because while she's a lone wolf, we won't have Lara being 100% lone wolf like in classic Tomb Raider. It would mean that everything we went through with Reboot is non-existent, where Lara is more, she's more present with people, there's more people around her. That's in the unification grand scheme of things. English is so hard. That wouldn't be realistic, I don't think, to expect this for the unification. If they brought back 100% classic Lara, I would say, okay, no, I don't want anybody here. I don't want any hub with people or whatever. Absolutely not. But considering it will be in there, like LAU elements would be here and Reboot element would be here, then in that case, since it suits to her character, in short dosage, sure, why not? But not as them following her wherever she goes, like a bunch of, baby ducks following mommy duck, you know what I mean?
I can't argue with anything you just said. Literally,
I do have spot on points,
It's like, get out of my brain. It's something that I think I would like to experience in a spin-off.
Absolutely.
I don't think that I would be up for it in a main game. I think it would be a little bit too far away from the core identity, no pun intended, of Tomb Raider to see all of this happening in one game. But for a spin-off, I think any of these scenarios would be really cool to explore, because you could expand on the greater lore of the Tomb Raider universe in ways that might feel a little bit out of place in a main game. Well, Hedy, thank you so much for joining me on Raidercast today. This has been such a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you've had a good time.
It has been really fun talking to you and, thinking about these hypotheses of new Tomb Raider, and that's all really good questions, and I'm very thrilled to have been able to discuss this with you. So thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.